Welcome back. I'm Ruth Ann, and this is For Those Who Care. Today, I'm joined by my dear friend and former co host, Jenna. We're going to have a conversation about how we help children understand and engage with disability, illness, and death. When my late husband, Lance, was diagnosed with early onset dementia in his late 30s, it changed our life in so many ways. During his later years, Jenna brought her children into our life, and their presence meant more than words can say. They weren't afraid. They asked questions. They connected with him in ways that felt honest and loving. And those moments left a lasting imprint on me. In this conversation, we'll explore what it looks like to talk with children about hard things and how doing so can strengthen our sense of community and compassion. Jenna, thank you so much for being here. I am really excited about this conversation.
Me too. It's good to be back here and chatting and just exploring not just kind of our history together, but even prior to meeting and how our lives have connected. And yeah, I'm excited.
Well, let's get right into the questions. How did you first start talking to your children about disability or death? Was it before you met Lance, or was Lance the reason that you started talking to them about it?
When I was thinking, kind of about that history and how that kind of manifested itself in our lives, I couldn't find a clear beginning. So I think I allowed it to be a part of the conversation as it presented itself, and I thought that the topic was something that they would be able to digest even on a really even in a very simple way. We would have conversations. One of the things that I remember specifically, and I think at least my older three probably really remember this, the younger two probably, I don't know that it happened as often when they were young, but when my oldest three, when they were very young, we lived in a house that was about 2 blocks from a funeral home. And so I homeschooled them, and the room where we did school most of the time had like a huge picture window in it. And we would be sitting there, and with some regularity, you would see a hearse and a funeral procession go down our street because of the funeral home that was just a couple blocks away. And for whatever reason, I don't know why, but I took that opportunity even when, maybe they were younger, 4, 5, 6, um, to, to just kind of point it out to them. Someone has lost someone that they love. And, or maybe they asked at one time. I don't remember exactly when that started, but I think we began just very simple conversations about what that meant. And so then they knew that when they would see that someone had died. And I think that opened up a lot of conversations and questions. What does that mean? How does that work? And they had experienced, maybe an animal dying, even from the time you're very young, like you kill a spider in the room, or my youngest would find worms out in the yard and play with those, and then she wouldn't be playing with them anymore because they were no longer alive. So it opened up a conversation about what that meant. And they never saw it, but they saw that there was this car that was carrying, I'd say, yeah, the person that has died is in that vehicle. And then these are all the people that maybe family member, friends, that they're going to, the graveside or wherever they're going to go bury this person. And so it just opened up a lot of very practical questions. What does that mean? And we would say a little prayer for the family every time they would drive by. And I'd say, well, do you want to say a little prayer for the family? And yeah, okay. And so we would do that. And I don't know what that meant to them. I don't know, because it wasn't, I mean, it was pretty abstract and they were little, but I think it at least opened the door to the conversation. So then there wasn't ever a time when we were trying to breach the full conversation um, in a way that was maybe awkward or clunky. It just naturally opened it up so they could ask more questions as they were um, wondering. And as far as disability, I think um, they had been around, particularly children. I don't know that they were around adults with disabilities very much, but they did have opportunities to be around children that, maybe I think we had a friend who had kids their age, and one of the little boys had Down syndrome. And so they were, exposed to that. And just the developmental, differences. So they could see like somebody is my age, but maybe they are developing differently. Um, my my daughters went to a school where they had classmates that had different disabilities, and they were exposed to that. And then they had obviously you know grandparents, but they also had a great aunt. It was my aunt, and she had multiple sclerosis, and they kind of always knew her being in a wheelchair and being pretty significantly disabled, and then watched that decline. And I think she passed away probably when my oldest were maybe like middle school, early high school age. Um, so they were exposed to that. And then I think a really impactful moment for them was I had a cousin whose daughter was killed in an accident. Um, she was the same age as my younger son. So that was, I think she was 13 when she was killed. So I think that was something that was impactful to them, and again brought up conversations and questions. What does that mean? How does that impact people? Why does this happen? I mean, and it offered me an opportunity to um, have those conversations with them, trying to answer their hard questions, or at least an opportunity to say, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. And this is just the reality of life, is that this does happen. And anyway, I think that gave them a very good kind of background and framework for when we met you. And I think Lance was the first time they had, outside of my aunt, who she would have been the same age as their grandfather. So that was quite a difference in terms of, for them, she was an old woman. Lance would have been the first time that they met someone who was my age, right? So this is the same age as my parents, and he is significantly disabled and, has the cognitive disability. And so that was I think quite significant for them. And so it did bring up, kind of a lot of conversations. And I think I've told you, my girls were always very concerned for you and what would you do? Because they did know, like, very early on that he was terminally ill. And so then they had to think through that, and it brought up questions. And it was funny because it was immediately they were concerned for you, and were you going to be okay? And I think didn't I tell you that they offered to take care of you when you
Yes.
got old?
Yes, because we never had children.
So it just, I think so many of those situations presented themselves at times that, um, I would just kind of think through how old are they, and what's their level of tolerance to things that are upsetting. But I wasn't one to shield my kids from things. I just was pretty pretty committed to helping them understand the realities of life at like in age appropriate rate topics and conversations. But um, I didn't sensationalize things very much. And I wasn't like overly emotional about things. I tried to present things in a very factual way because I just thought these are just realities of life. The emotions will come as they get older and develop more, but these are realities the same as, you know, it, the seasons or birthdays, they're just part of life. So I don't know. I don't know if that was the right way, but that was what I did.
Well, with your children being at such different ages, how did you determine what they could handle emotionally or developmentally?
That's interesting because I recently just listened to a conversation. Maybe it was a podcast or something. I don't exactly remember, but the topic was that um, no two children, siblings, grow up in the same home. And the point being that the environment is constantly evolving and changing and different. And so, what's age appropriate for your oldest? So, I had five. So, the things that were occurring in my home and the things I talked about when my oldest was 10 years old was very different from when my youngest was 10 years old because there's no way to avoid that. So my 10-year-old, my oldest, right, if he's 10, then you are I have four other kids that are younger than him. So he is surrounded with babies and toddlers, and that's what we're doing is, I mean, there's toys in the house and we're watching cartoons and we're reading kids books, and I'm trying to like stretch him along to mature him, but our life is centered around diapers and potty training and um, preschool and things like that. When you shift all that, now my youngest is 10, she's surrounded with teenagers and adults and fewer people in the home. There's no toys. There's no there's no goldfish crackers in the house. It's We're not watching cartoons. It's a very different environment. And so to go along with that, the conversations change. So I think it's the same thing that happens if you've got a child that grows up in a home where a different language is spoken versus one that doesn't. The one that is exposed to that second language is going to pick some of that up, even if you aren't actively teaching them that language, where the other one is getting zero exposure to it. And I think just the conversations that were taking place between when I had my oldest being 10, that was a very different conversation versus my youngest being 10. She's hearing all the more mature adult conversations. So I don't, I never assumed that what I did with one could be done with the other. It was always based on an overall environment. I'm older. I have a different perspective and maturity. Um, their peers might be different. Their environment's different. So I always just tried to base it on wherever we were at that moment. And if I have one that's 16 and one that's 6, I have to find the like happy medium in conversation. And there's going to be one-on-one conversations with my 16-year-old that my 6-year-old is not going to be a part of. But the 6-year-old is going to hear a lot more adult conversations than my oldest did when he was 6, just because that's what they're around. And so I think this idea that we're going to somehow manage each child, and if you have more than one child, you'll just kind of see that phenomenon occur. This idea that we can manage what they're exposed to, what they hear, it's unrealistic because their environment is different. It just is. So I think I realized that pretty early on when I was like, oh, this this 4-year-old is hearing things and conversations that this 4-year-old never heard because they didn't have older siblings. So um, I think I was just honest about you and Lance, and this was your situation. And like I said, I could probably have more in depth conversations with my older ones that were, older teenagers or adults than with my youngest. Because I think was my youngest 10.
Your second youngest was 10.
Okay, so my youngest would have been 8. So and my oldest would have been, I think he was 18 or 19 when I met you. I think there's about a 10 or 11 year spread there. Um, so yeah, it was just to my youngest, yes, this is, a woman that I met at the gym and her husband, and here's how we're going to engage in their life. And well, what does that mean? Well, we're going to go over and hang out with them, and I think they would say things. Well, what do I do? I don't know, and I didn't give them direction. I just said, I don't know. I Let's just go see. Let's go see what we do. And if you feel uncomfortable, let me know and you can, step to the side or hang back a little bit, and that's okay. I think I always gave them permission to be uncomfortable. And I think then let them be in control of how and when they engaged. I think what is hard is sometimes you'll say to kids, it's fine, why are you being so weird? Or we say to them, or we just decide for them, oh, this is too much. They can't be around that. But I think what I tried to do is say, here is a scenario. You may be uncomfortable, you may not. Let's go and see. And if you are uncomfortable, we can talk about that later. And it's okay to be a little bit uncomfortable at first and to warm up and maybe become a little more comfortable. It's okay. It doesn't have to be one or the other, and you can decide what feels right.
And I will say, we've got a lot more to this conversation, but I just want to respond to that. Um, I think having those conversations is so important, and made made it possible for me to have a deeper relationship with them after Lance died. And I think that that's really cool. I don't know that I would have had that. In fact, I'm pretty sure I wouldn't have. Thinking about other friends and their children, the relationships are very different. So I'm really glad that you did that, because I love the relationships that I'm building with all of your kids.
Well, like I said, none of it it was purposeful but not on purpose, if that makes sense. Like I I wanted them to see that this is this couple that could use some love. And like, I wasn't in a space where I could do a lot, but I was like, well, we can come hang out once in a while and have some fun and enjoy one another's company and talk. And so there was just it was very low pressure. And you guys were really good about just letting us be whatever we could be. And um and I didn't expect them to feel like super excited about these people who were like kind of strangers and kind of some that might be uncomfortable because they hadn't been in that situation. And your house was very much set up for caregiving, so it was a very strange environment. It wasn't like the normal, like go into your friend's house where everything's kind of familiar. It was unfamiliar. And so I was sensitive to that, to say like it might feel a little uncomfortable, and I know you don't really know these people, and that's okay. That's all okay. And I don't expect anything from you other than a good attitude. Have a good attitude. That's, that's enough. And I let them kind of approach and interact as they felt compelled in that moment. And I think that was the key. I don't know.
Well, it worked well, and we had so much fun with them. We really enjoyed spending time with them. Lance loved it when they would come over.
I think I was really nervous too because I all of my kids are talkers, and um I think I was really nervous because they can all talk at the same time and it can be really loud and a lot. And I knew you were used to a quiet home. And so I think I warned you about it before I brought them all.
You did. You did. And I told Lance about it. I mean, not that he remembered because he had really bad short-term memory loss, but he was excited for them to come over and it all worked out great. He just kind of fit right in there with everybody. And we had an activity. So the first time I think you came over, everybody was painting rocks except me. I was taking pictures and videos. But it worked out because everybody was busy doing something and it kept Lance focused on that. And I think it just made that was a really good icebreaker, I think.
I think so too. And I think having something to do, a very specific activity, I think that helped too. So I just think between the two of us, we were able to set up a really good environment for them to just explore that because it really was as impactful to them as I think it was to you guys. Like it just gave them a broadened perspective on life and the different ways that people live. And I mean, it allowed them to develop a relationship with someone who had a terminal illness. That is not insignificant. Um, and I think it would have been very easy as a mom to kind of shield, like, why would I do that? Why would I introduce them to somebody who I know is going to die? That would be too hard on them. But I would counter that with people everywhere all the time, every day, get family pets. And the reality of a family pet is that you're probably going to bury that pet someday. And so kids are way better at processing that stuff than we think they are. And I just think we don't give them a chance to say, like, it's okay. It's hard and it's sad, but it's okay.
Yeah.
So
Children are resilient and it's going to make it easier for them to go through situations like that as they get older.
there's something to that being familiar with a situation that gives you a confidence to embrace it or approach it even as you get older. So I think you're exactly right. Like it it just gives them a confidence. I think as they get older that like, okay, yeah, I've done this before and I've seen this before and it's okay.
It makes me think of how many people in our life were so uncomfortable with Lance dying, and your kids weren't. I mean, if they were, they didn't show it outwardly. I mean, how many people did not want to even communicate with us after Lance died because it was too uncomfortable for them? Your kids did not act like that.
No. And they like we had the conversation at home multiple times about and that's when they would ask about you and it was really funny because it was like they loved him and eh, because they met him when they did, I think they accepted immediately that he was on that path. And it opened up conversations to say, well, newsflash, we all are, because, and I think I would reference, your cousin, that was, she was 13. And I mean, it was um, my cousin's daughter. So it was their second cousin. But, we went to family events and they played with her and they knew her. And so I think it was like, we're all on that path, whether we want to acknowledge it or not. And that was part of the conversation was we're all on this path. Lance just has a little better idea of his timeline maybe than the rest of us do. He's aware of, what this illness is and what it's doing to his body. Um, and it really didn't take long for them to become focused on you and are you going to be okay. It was very interesting that I hadn't really expected was that they I think, and I'm speaking for them, but what I observed was that they could love him and support him as he walked through the end of his life, but realizing like Ruth Ann's still going to be here. So their response to you was very different. Like, who's going to take care of her and what's she going to do and where's she going to go? And like that troubled them far more than the idea of him dying was the idea of you being alone. So that was, I think, so huge for them to see like somebody is left after that and that person will need your support going forward. And they've all stayed in touch with you, which I just think is so fun.
I love hearing from them. Oh, that just makes me cry. That's I felt that all along with them, that they cared so much about both of us and that they were concerned about me. Oh my gosh, that's awesome. Well, I'm curious. You talked about death with them. Was that the most uncomfortable conversations you had with them, or were there harder questions that they asked?
I tried really hard not to make any conversation uncomfortable. In because I like I said, I didn't overly dramatize things. Um, and there's a I guess you could call it a joke. It's now a running joke in our family, and I it's not a joke, but a point of anytime I have something serious to tell them, some news that is serious, I'll say, "Hey, I need to talk to you guys." Just like that. "Hey, I need to talk to you." And they immediately say, "Who died?" And that's never been the answer. So I don't know why that, but because I think that's because I didn't dramatize things. So when there is something serious, the joke was it must be life or death serious. Because it wasn't that things weren't serious, it was that I tried not to like be overly dramatic about things. And so if I was coming to them with something to say, like, I have something I need to talk to you about, something serious, then they immediately were like, oh, it must be life or death serious. So now anytime I say I have something very serious I need to talk to you about, they always say, who died? There have been a couple times that, it was that. And again, like I said, I just tried not to dramatize it. I think if I could give like a little nugget of wisdom is kids they're way more able to process things than we like give them credit for. Um, it's sort of like kid food. Like I never fed my kids kid food. I just fed them what we were eating and they ate it. And maybe I got lucky that I didn't have picky eaters, maybe possible. But I kind of watched other families and I thought, well, why'd you feed them kid food? Like you can feed a 4-year-old lasagna, like they'll eat it. You don't have to just feed them, goldfish and chicken nuggets. They'll eat like whatever you're eating. And so I kind of think that way with like life things. It's like they're capable of handling information. I mean, you kind of have to distill it down to something that their brain can comprehend, but it's okay to just be honest with them and let their brain process things and say, hey, come to me when you have questions. Let's talk about, this. And I'm here to answer all your questions. And it's funny, when I would tell them something, they would just kind of go, oh, okay. And inevitably, they'd go off, and maybe it would be hours or days later, they would come back. And so you could tell they had thought about it for a while. And they would come back and say, remember that thing you said about this? And they would have some question that their brain had formulated, as they had thought about it some more. But opening those conversations, I tried not to make it uncomfortable. I tried to just talk about it the way we would talk about, like I said, the seasons or the weather or, any other thing. And I don't know if that was the right way to do it, but it did seem to allow them to be more, um, like more open.
Well, Lance behaved unpredictably because of his dementia. How did you handle those situations with your kids, talking to them about it? I'm thinking about something specific, but I'm wondering if you're thinking of anything.
You know what's funny is if I didn't trust that you guys were safe, um, I would never have brought my kids around. And I knew that there could be inappropriate things that might come out of his mouth. But to be fair, there's inappropriate things that come out of my mouth. And if I had a penny for every time I had to say, "Oh, mom shouldn't have said that. Mom shouldn't have acted that way." Um, but they were exposed to, I don't know. They had been around inappropriate individuals that I had to probably rethink on occasion my decision to allow them to be around certain adults. But I wasn't concerned. I wasn't concerned. And if I had been, I would not have brought them around. So I had spent just enough time around you guys that I had no concerns that they would be able to handle any of it. Yeah, I was more concerned that they would say things that would be offensive or inappropriate because we were just pretty open as a family. Like we just didn't, I don't know. I wasn't very good at kind of filtering that stuff.
I don't think that that's a bad thing. It made it so much easier for us to spend some time with them.
Well, and they did really well around adults. I think we were very fortunate. We had all my family lived nearby, and we had a whole other generation of family. Like I said, they played with their second cousins. So they were always kind of exposed to adults and adult conversations, and um even I'm the oldest of six. So even my two oldest kids spent time around my siblings who were adults. So they were always kind of exposed to adults and adult conversations. And, we would try to watch ourselves and say, well, that's not appropriate to talk about with the little ones right here, and they're four and they repeat what you say or whatever. But they they were pretty well equipped to have conversations with adults, and that was very purposeful, and I would even say that was on purpose. I did not want to have kids who couldn't have a conversation with an elderly person, an adult my age, a teenager, and another child. Like I wanted to have somebody who could communicate with people regardless of their age or who they were. They could communicate with them because they were both human beings. And that was really, really, really important to me. And I think I spoke to them like I mean, obviously age appropriate, but I would speak to them like I would speak to other people. And um, communication has always been very, very, very important to me. And so it was very important to me as I was raising kids that they were given the tools to be good communicators. And part of that is being able to communicate with people outside of your immediate peer group. And so I think that probably, now that I'm talking through it, that probably figured into being able to be around and communicate with people with disabilities, um, because it's just another way of communication.
Did you notice anything in your kids' emotional growth or understanding as they spent more time with Lance?
I think yes, but to just to the degree that it enriched their lives. So it was taking a framework that was already in place and making it stronger and making it more tangible, something that was a little closer to them instead of kind of maybe peripheral um, situations where maybe they would see someone out and about in public, it was a stranger. And so we could have a conversation about what disability looked like and what it meant, and what that would be like to live with that, or how do you do this, or why is it like that? And, you know, I think Lance was then something that was real. They could touch and feel and hear and see, oh, this is a real person and I can have a real conversation with them. And I think, again, and not to like belabor this point, but what they ultimately saw was you. And so I think that was the huge emotional growth that took place with them, is not that someone is becomes ill and dies. It was that someone survives. And that I think was so impactful to them because, and maybe it was from watching the funeral processions, right? They had not seen it in the stage that they observed Lance. So that was filling in these gaps of something that they knew existed. I don't know that we talked a lot about widows and widowers and what that looked like. I mean, I think they had seen it like in grandmas and grandpas, right? Old people to them, but you're young. And I think that was where they had the most questions. It was always like that was something that I don't think I had ever thought of I shouldn't say that. I don't think I ever thought to share with them that element existed. And that was where I think if they struggled to process anything, it was that.
So the conversations you had after they spent time with Lance, was it more about me and how I was going to be afterwards? Or did you have conversations about any of it to help them process it?
I think in the beginning, it was just the basic questions of, what happened to him, and, is he going to die? And as they got to know you, it quickly became, well, if he's going to die, what happens to Ruth Ann? And that, I mean, they very quickly accepted, yes, that's a thing that happens. People become ill and they die, or they get in an accident and they die. And so that they had kind of like wrapped their brain around at whatever, maturity level. Um, but like I said, we hadn't talked about widows and widowers and survivors, and they just had like so many concerns about, and that was probably the bulk of our conversation, was about you and what happens, how do you move on, what does that look like, and maybe not even you specifically, but just anyone in that scenario, like, oh, I hadn't thought about there's maybe going to be a spouse, and that's a very different conversation than a mother or a child, like, or a parent or a child, right? I think because they were a child and they had parents, they could kind of relate. What would that be like if my parents died? Well, I know how I'd feel because I'm a child. And if my parents died, here's how I would feel. Um, and I know how much my parents love me. And so if I died, they'd be heartbroken. I don't think they had thought about it from a spouse perspective. It was like, that's something different. What does a spouse do when when their husband, like, what's she going to do? Like, they were really working that out in their head. So I would say that quickly, very quickly, became the bulk of our conversations. And it wasn't that they didn't care about him, it was that they saw that when he was gone, you were still going to be here. And they saw the value in investing in a relationship with you. I think that's what they saw, and that you were going to need that.
I love that such young people thought of something like that because so many adults don't think of that.
And I wish I could like wrap my head around why that is, but
I think it's because we don't have these conversations when we're young, because so busy shielding your kids from the reality that we're all going to die.
And if I had to say, and I don't know if I expressed this to them, I'm trying to think of how I expressed the idea that they had permission to be uncomfortable, but they didn't have permission to avoid the discomfort. And that was, I think if I could like verbalize it, that's what it was. It's like, I'm not going to allow you to avoid the discomfort, but you can be uncomfortable, and that's okay. And I think, I hope, I hope that that was useful to them, to say like, you, there's more to you than you realize, and you can go through hard things and uncomfortable situations, and you'll be okay on the other side. And I did protect them from things that I thought would be like genuinely damaging or harmful to them. It wasn't to say I threw them to the wolves, but when I saw opportunities to gain resilience and maturity and compassion and just personal growth, it was like, let's go ahead and be uncomfortable, and that's okay. That's okay. And you'll be okay. And you don't have to, um, you don't have to make excuses for it. Like, or you don't have to be dismissive of it. You can be uncomfortable. Like, and I know you're uncomfortable, and I'm sorry, and I know that sucks, but it's also okay.
Well, I think that all of those things you just said show what people can gain by exposing their children to real life circumstances like this. And that's really important.
I think so too. And I think, I know as a parent, the things that I wanted to shield my kids from were things that I had personally experienced or been hurt by. So I think it's really easy to carry a lot of your own experiences and pain or achievements or whatever. It's really easy to carry that into your parenting. And I know I did that, because I don't know that it's avoidable completely, but I did try to be aware of it and try to mitigate some of it, because I didn't want my kids to be hindered or burdened by the same things that I was. Like, if I can give them a bit more of a chance at being, you know, more mature or healthy or emotionally resilient, like I want them to have that. So, I don't know. I will say this. You're gonna screw up a lot of stuff as a parent. Like, it's going to happen. There is no getting around that. And you will, there's a lot of hindsight, and you kind of go like, oh, I could have done that differently. But I think if you are purposeful and you think ahead, right? Like, what do I want? How do I want them to handle situations down the road? Don't be afraid to start building that when they're young. It's okay. Like, that stuff, it all accumulates over time, and you don't just magically end up with an emotionally resilient adult. Like, that starts when they're little, maybe babies. I don't know. I don't know when it starts, but it's never too early to start helping your children build those skills and just learn about the world around them. It's never too early.
That is all really great advice for any parents who might be hesitant to involve their children in the lives of someone dealing with a serious illness, chronic disability, or even a terminal illness. What do you hope your children carry with them from that time that they spent with Lance and me?
I hope that they are never afraid to reach out to someone that maybe is struggling with those things. Um, I hope that they feel empowered to speak up and advocate for people. Um, and I hope, because this is something, well, we didn't talk about this. I hope that they develop healthy boundaries so that they are able to accurately and honestly assess, what can I be for this person? Because we've talked about this. One of the things I had to do when I met you guys is be honest with myself about what I could be in your life, like what I had to give at that moment. And I hope that they are able to be aware of their own limitations and not use them as an excuse, but also not overextend themselves in a way that becomes disappointing and harmful to the person that they intended to help in the first place. So I hope that all of that gets wrapped up, that they just learn how to have healthy relationship with anyone whose life they feel called to be in, regardless of what that life looks like. And never feel like, well, I'm not going to engage with this person because what do we have in common? Because what did you and I have in common? Like literally nothing, right? And so I just think, I hope that they saw that there's some of these whose life looks very, very, very different from mine. And I know nothing about that life, but I know that they're a human and I'm a human, and we can, you know, we can find something to talk about. Like, so I think that's what it is. I hope that they learn to, or they have learned to appreciate all different types of families and all different types of people, and they feel comfortable pursuing a relationship with someone as long as they feel called to be in their life.
Jenna, thank you so much for sharing your heart and your wisdom today. Your story shows that involving kids in life's hardest moments doesn't take away their innocence. It can actually deepen their empathy and their sense of belonging. One of Jenna's sons will be here another time to talk about his experience and how it changed him. To anyone listening who is walking beside a loved one who's dealing with a disability or an illness, you are not alone. These conversations are how we keep community alive, by showing up, by staying curious, and allowing love to exist even in the uncomfortable spaces. I hope this episode encourages you to open up a conversation of your own, especially with the young people in your life. Jenna, thank you so much. I really appreciate everything that you shared with us today.
Well, thank you. It was an honor to get to just have this conversation. And like I've said this before, and I'll say it again, thank you for allowing us to be in your life, because I know we can be a loud and rowdy bunch. So I appreciated that you just allowed us into your heart. So we're forever grateful and better for it, all of us.
Yep, all of us. Thanks again, and I will see you next time.
Alrighty, I'll see you.